They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.
What up? Welcome back to the Necro Zoo. I am Bones. And in this one, let's go ahead and add one more Megafig to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now this time we will take a look at Mongul. Now there is a little bit of discrepancy on which version of Mongul this is. It seems to be the death metal version, but if you look on the box, it does only say Superman villains, and it is actually kind of hard to pin down what version of Mongul this is. Now there's some differences, like the artwork on the back of the box does show a certain version of him. He does have 5 fingers on that version, but of course this figure has 4, and actually, as far as I know, he's supposed to have 4 fingers, so I do not necessarily know where that source material comes from. But Mongul, pretty interesting character. He does rule a world called War World. Basically, it is a big planet that is kind of like its own weapon, and Mongul likes to, cruise around the galaxies and take prisoners and put them in war games and different stuff like that. Usually when you'll see him in different forms of entertainment, he's actually having a race or a battle or something like that that involves some kidnapped superheroes. But he is most definitely mainly a Superman villain. Now he does look pretty brutal in the packaging, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. But first, he does come with your standard black DC Multiverse stand. Now, these are not really needed, but sometimes they do come in useful. He also comes with his data file card. On the front, you do have some source material artwork from the comics, even though it is not necessarily this rendition of Mongul. And on the back, you do have some information. Now, shout out to my boy Botan, who, helped me a little bit to understand what version of Mongul this is. He does usually come in either a sleeved version of a costume or a bare sleeve version. Different renditions of this character, depending on, if it's a classic Mongul or New 52. But he is an older character, so he does have a long history fighting Superman. But it does seem that this is the version from the death metal. So there's like a version of the Justice League that is fighting in one of his arenas. And they just released the Gladiator Batman, which is this version. But you do have Cyborg, Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, Wonder Woman. They are all present in this storyline. But pretty cool. We'll add this card to the collection, and let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. Now, as per se a Megafig, he is pretty large. I will say he feels kind of light. Like, you could tell that his torso is a little bit hollow, but the arms and the legs do bring in the weight a little bit. But like comparing this to, like, say, Man-Bat or Clayface, this is kind of like in between, where it's not necessarily super heavy, but it isn't actually really hollow as well. You got a good mixture, and he actually feels good in hand. Like, that's the first thing I noticed, is that for a mega figure, he does feel a little bit lighter, maybe possibly giving him a little bit more dexterity, but haven't really checked him out. So first impressions, awesome design of the character. As I said before, sometimes he does come with bare arms and sometimes he'll come fully suited. Actually, I do own the only other Mongol figure that I own. Well, actually, it's two. I do own the DC Universe Classics, which is actually a re-release of the DC Superheroes Mongol. In that one, he has covered arms. But then they did do like a repaint of that one, which was for like a lantern wave, where he does have a ring, and right there he does have the bare arms. I do have those behind me. I do own those. But ever since those Mongols, this is the first Mongol that I own, so pretty cool for McFarlane to put this one out. Now, one of the first things that hits me is the way his suit is designed, like the way the belt ties into the harness that goes like on his upper body, and the way all the little intricate designs, kind of reminiscent of like Kirby artwork, you know, like kind of like fourth world technology. So, but he is an outer space character, so it does make a lot of sense. But all in all, pretty much your basic Mongol design, and he does have tons of cool, intricate sculpt work from his arms to even, like I said before, the technology that he has on his suit. So pretty awesome. Let's take a look at the head sculpt. Now, when I saw images of this one, as with a lot of McFarlane figures, it kind of looked goofy to me. Like when I first saw the images, I was like, man, why did they choose that rendition of Mongol? Because he doesn't really give me a menacing feeling. He gives me more kind of like killer clowns from outer space, or something like that. He just had like a weird look in the face sculpt. But actually having him in hand, it actually is really deceiving. The way the head sculpt is, he does have some nice detail, like in the face, on the brow. Even the teeth are like really nicely sculpted in. They have a cool like wash, like a dark wash on them to make them stick out. And the way his head is like encased in this like outer spaceman kind of head harness is actually really interesting. But the detail on the face and having him here in hand, it actually, you know, fits right in with the McFarlane DC Multiverse line, as it is really detailed and has tons of like added little sculpt work and design lines. You have the darkness around the eyes and then little like beady red eyes, you know, sitting in there in the skull. So a lot happier I am than I thought I would be with the head sculpt, going off of the first images that I saw. Now let's take a look at the articulation. Now this is a weird setup, because he is on one of those heads like the Three Jokers Batman, where the neck and the head are actually connected, and there's a ball under there where they are, you know, sitting, and what gives it its movement. So the articulation is pretty limited, but you do have up, down, you have your right to left, and of course you could rock it for some attitude. Now this is one thing I'm talking about, is that like on his suit right here in front of his neck, it's really soft plastic, so you could actually move it and you get a lot of good head range there. And if you really push it up, you can get him to look up really well. But it's just kind of restricted the way the design is and the execution of the way they have it on that same neck connected to the upper head. But for what it is, he's a big figure. He has all those, you know, gears and stuff going on around his head. So pretty much you could get him in some like awesome poses. So that's all you really need from this head sculpt. So I'm happy with that. Let's go ahead and look at the waist articulation. You do have side to side. You do have that full tilt to whirl at the waist, which is actually pretty smooth. You do have the waist swivel. No upper chest swivel, it's just one solid piece, but you could still twist them, get them in some pretty cool poses. Not much of a crunch. Isn't going forward anytime soon, but he can lean back pretty well. So for a mega figure, it is kind of what we've come to expect from McFarlane. Really nicely sculpted, but a little bit restricted on the articulation, but you can actually get them in some poses, I'm pretty sure, if you just, mess around with them. Now, before we go on, let's go ahead and take a look at that awesome chest harness. I just love the design and all the little details, all the cool, intricate sculpt work that it has. And as I said before, that belt is pretty cool. I could see probably doing some repaint work on this guy and adding some wash to make all this stuff pop a little bit more, even on the arms and the other parts of the sculpt, just to make it, stick out a little bit more, give it a little bit more life. So I might actually look into doing that with this one. Now, if you take a look at the shoulders, there is no bushing inside the socket here, but it is very interesting the way they designed it, because the outer part of the harness where the shoulder is actually pliable rubber. So it kind of works as the ring would work. So when you move it, it kind of like takes shape the way you move it, and then when you move it back, it goes back to the way it was. So you do still get up and down and front to back, and a lot of cool range in that shoulder, even though it doesn't have the traditional like faux butterfly joint that McFarlane uses. Now, there is no bicep swivel, but at the elbow, which are single jointed, you do have that elbow swivel, which is actually what helps him get a lot more range than he would usually get by being single jointed. So it kind of like takes the place of the bicep swivel when you can move the forearms like this, back and forth. Now, taking a look at the arms, really nicely detailed. Look at all the veins and the kind of, texture in the skin, the alien skin of this guy. Moving down into some cool outer space gauntlets. Now, these colors are like out of this world. Like green with dark blue, and then some purple in this, and all encased in like high shiny silver. It's just something you don't really see a lot of. And then moving past those gauntlets down into the hands, you do have a fist on this left hand, and then on the other side, same thing, but it goes down into like a kind of, gesturing hand. And another difference with this one, besides that he has 4 fingers, like I said before, he is on a hinge wrist, so all you get is the movement of up and down. You can't, get the usual tilt movement that you get from the ball joint. But for a mega figure, it is passable. I mean, you could get them in a lot of cool poses, have them holding stuff, so not a big deal. Easily to get them in a pretty cool T-pose. Actually, no, that's about as high as you could get it. You can't put his arms up above his head, even though it is limited because of the harness. There is no, cutouts here the way they do on some of the figures. Let's go down and take a look at the thigh swivel. Now, I wanted to check this out. So actually, he does have pretty cool thigh swivel. He got some good range there, which means that you can move the boot left to right without actually having a thigh cut or anything like that. He can kick up, respectable, but he can't kick back really high. Now, of course, as always, do not be afraid, because the trunks are rubber, and when you put the legs back to their original form, they'll go back and mold themselves to the way they were when you started. But I did want to check out if you could cock out his leg and get that cool hip swivel. Oh man, and you actually can. Double jointed knees, straighten them out. You do have up and down, really cool, kind of on a hinge, but that means that you can't really get right to left, because as soon as you try and make that turn, it actually starts giving you a rocker, which can also be used getting them in some stances for the foot placement. And of course, you do have toe articulation. Now, before we go, let's take a look at the lower body. Love these boots, the way they're like design, kind of like a crazy space cowboy. And then going up into the legs, you do have a little strip of like added beaded texture, which is kind of reminiscent of what McFarlane does on the Green Lanterns or on the Lanterns. So it's kind of cool that he added a little bit of, design here to give it some pizzazz. All in all, looks pretty cool. Now, the colors, like I said, are kind of weird. And if you look at a lot of images online, the blue that is here is actually supposed to be on the legs and also on the gauntlets. So, pretty interesting the choices that they go with to give us different color schemes. But honestly, what I wanted to say is that the more you play with this guy and the more you move him around, the weird and obscure color scheme actually starts to grow on you. So that is rather interesting. Let's take a look at him from the bottom. No tread, but he does have some identifying marks. And this is something I really wanted to take a look at. Moving up on the back of the boots, you have some nice sculpt work into just some, plain leg sculpt going into the trunks, into the back of the belt. And then my favorite part is this crazy breathing apparatus. It might be, I'm not sure what it is, but it is hooked onto his back. And you got a little bit of connectors going to the front. Not necessarily sure what all these gizmos are for, but one thing that is for certain, this kind of gives you some space, Flash Gordon vibes, the way the design is and all the cool lines and just all the little details that go into all this foreign technology that is from outer space is just really, really interesting. And like I said, I'd like to give this a dark wash and see how it looks after you give it a wash to make all, to bring out all the sculpt work that they did. It would have been cool if this little cable that goes down into his spine would have went further and actually had little nodules to represent vertebrae. That would have been pretty cool, but I mean, this is probably more reminiscent of the comic book artwork. So all in all, I'm actually really happy with this guy. He looks pretty cool. You don't get too many Mongul figures floating around. And I'd have to actually say that I don't usually say this. I usually just review the figure and say the good points and the bad points and leave it up to you. But do not sleep on this. If you get a chance to get this guy and add him to your shelf, I would really, suggest in doing that because he's actually pretty fun. Now, I did want to do some comparisons before we go. And let's see, first we'll put him up next to the Hush Superman. Now, I did repaint the Hush Superman eyes and made the irises very tiny. And yeah, to me that looks a lot better than the way it was before. But right here you can get some idea of scale between the two figures. Then let's go ahead and bring out another space character, villain slash anti-hero, which is Lobo. Now this is my customized version that has a lot of cool detail, metal chain, cigar, and actually a blaster, a space blaster. So pretty awesome. These two figures actually, complement each other because they're both from, out in space, so look pretty good together. And then finally, just for some size, because Bane is pretty big, the mega figure Bane, but actually standing this guy next to him really makes you see what a big figure is. This guy's really tall. I think he's a head taller than Bane, and it kind of goes to show what they can do with the mega figure size. Really some intimidating size there on your shelf. But anyways, guys, really happy with him. You can pose him around, take some pictures with him, get some not too articulated poses, but you can squeeze a little bit out of him. Of course, this character is more than likely just posing in a powerful position, just standing, holding stuff or barking orders. But you can mess around with him and get a little bit more out of him. But you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.